As Libyan opposition fighters attempt to tighten the noose in their push towards Tripoli, the unsolved murder of the rebel military commander General Abdel Fattah Younes is casting serious doubts on the capability of the rebel leadership. Is the National Transitional Council in full control of the opposition forces? Does it have the full support of the anti-Gaddafi movement? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Nick Clark and welcome to the programme. The mystery surrounding the death of General Abdel Fattah Younes late last month has cast a shadow on the Opposition Council's competence and unity. Now, for the first time, members of General Younes's family have expressed their concerns about the rise of extremist groups within the opposition ranks. Tony Birtley has this report.
An NTC Judicial Committee issued an arrest warrant for General Younes to answer questions over military matters. The job of enforcing that warrant was given to militia units, not members of the regular rebel army. On Wednesday, July the 27th, the heavily armed force arrived at General Younes's operations room in Ajdabiya.
We tried to contact Mustafa Jalil, but his phone was switched off, and the same with his secretary. There were many attempts to contact the NTC, but we had no response.
General Younes, his two aides, Mohammed Khamis and Mustafa Matakor, and 4 cars of officers were driven in convoy to Benghazi. According to those we've spoken to, there was no phone reception and none of the 7 checkpoints was manned.
We thought that we were just going back to Benghazi and that the cars were there for protection. The other suspicious thing was that they were repeating Allah Akbar, and they said they had captured Gaddafi agents.
General Younes and his men arrived here about 4 o'clock in the morning. As they approached, they were joined and surrounded by even more militia vehicles. And at this point, they were jumped on by militia members. They were handcuffed. His main body of men were kept outside of this garrison, but General Younes and his 2 aides were taken through these gates into the garrison. And that was the last time General Younes and his 2 aides were seen alive by his men. Mustafa Abdul Jalil, president of the NTC, announced General Younes had been killed before the body had been found.
Mr.
Mustafa Abdel Jalil said they were killed, but we don't have the bodies yet. This is the inconsistency I'm talking about. How can you say someone is dead and you have not seen the body?
And according to the medical examiner's report, Mr. Jalil said the 3 men were lightly burned and did not have their throats cut. These accounts are disputed.
They were all shot and burnt. Their throats were cut and one of the bodies had the right eye taken out. So I don't care about the difference in the reports. I know what state they were in, and that's all that matters to me.
Suspects include pro-Gaddafi elements and Islamist groups who've been operating outside the umbrella of the opposition armed forces.
We have only just started a revolution that everybody participated in. We haven't started any political groups or anything. For now, I think that everybody just wants the rest of Libya to be liberated.
The support of the powerful Obeidat tribe to which the general belonged is seen as critical to the success of the revolution.
I wish for the NTC to be honest and to bring justice, because if this thing does not happen, then the Obeidat tribe will have to take it into their own hands.
Despite repeated requests, no one from the NTC agreed to be interviewed nor give a comment about the allegations. Division and infighting is the last thing that Libya's rebels need. It would make the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi even more difficult than it's already proving. Tony Birtley, Benghazi for Inside Story.
OK, let's take this on. For more, I'm joined by our guests from London, Ashur Shamis, a Libyan journalist and writer. And also from London, we have Shashank Joshi, who's an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. And joining us on the line from MSAD in Libya, Anas El-Gamati, a Libyan political analyst. Gentlemen, we'll look at the precise military position in more detail in 10 or 15 minutes or so. First, let's just see where you think we are with the opposition leadership itself and the business of murder. Ashur Shamis, why do you think it has not been possible to pin down who did this, who murdered Abdel Fattah Younes?
Well, I think the question is very complex. There was some confusion regarding the recall of Abdel Fattah Younes, as you recall, and his murder. Now, these are two unconnected, to my mind, events. And somehow the council made a statement in which they gave the impression that they are connected, which has confused the issue further, and there are more questions than answers there. So I think this was the problem with it. But I think as far as the murder is concerned, I think it was committed by elements who are loyal to Gaddafi, and it is meant to disrupt and cause confusion in the ranks of the opposition. There is no doubt about it.
Okay, let me put that across to
an event that hasn't gone.
Let's put that across to our other guest in London, Shashank Joshi. What do you make of that?
Well, there's no evidence he was killed by pro-Gaddafi forces. There's no evidence at all of that. In fact, we've had senior members of the rebel leadership themselves say he was killed by people who were nominally fighting against the regime. We, of course, don't know because we don't have enough information at this point. I will, however, say the reaction to this, I think, has been exaggerated. In fact, the TNC has responded reasonably well. It's shown itself to be responsive, able to accommodate different views, and it's understood if it doesn't react with urgency and vigour, it's going to fall apart. Now, I think a lot of this will hinge on whether this enormous reshuffle that's just taken place proves satisfying to everyone in Benghazi.
And as El Gamati on the line from Libya, do you think that the National Transitional Council acted with urgency and vigour over this?
Well, I think in fact it may have acted with too much urgency. In fact, there's not enough consistency in their line, which I think is the main problem that they're facing now, which is, I mean, one can see it as a problem, but one can also see it as an opportunity for them to prove their democratic credentials and for them to maintain some consistency. And the difference in between the Information Minister, Media Minister Mahmoud Shamam and Mustafa Abjadid's opinions have confused some people. But I think, given that it's a conflict and given that we're in a militarized moment, which is not really as transparent as some of the people in Libya may have liked, I think they're definitely doing the best they can. It's only time that will tell now at the moment.
Right. I'm just wondering what you think of what General Younes's, sorry to jump in there, but what General Younes's nephew describes, how he describes the suspects, suspects of the murder, that is to say, people who are far from Islam. And he says, yes, I'm worried about them coming into our society. Yes, they are all extremist groups. To what extent do you think that's true, and how much of a danger does that pose to the whole movement?
I think some of the criticism is profoundly, exaggerated. And I think it's some of the opinions that are given are not really grounded upon fact. Yes, the IFG, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, existed in Libya, but the very symptoms in which and the very water in which this fish of extremism used to swim. These facts no longer exist in Libya. There is, open, widespread liberty of speech, at least for freedom to speak and freedom of assembly. And the very, very ingredients in which extremism seems to be nurtured is no longer existent in the east of Libya.
Let's put your comments to Ashur Shamish. Let's put your comments to Ashur Shamish. What do you think about that? Do you think there's too broad a brushstroke, this description of extremist groups within the ranks?
I don't really believe there are extremist elements within the leadership of the council, but there are outside the council, there are some extremist elements, but they don't have any sway at all in Libya at the moment. They don't have any voice to express them. The thing is that within the council, they are very, very keen to make sure that there is no Islamic or other extremist element at all. And but Islam is something that is general in Libya. There are Muslims and Islamists, strict Muslims within the council, but strict Muslim doesn't necessarily mean an extremist Muslim. And in any case, there are other extremists in the area because of the lack of security, because of the very loose situation which exists at the moment, which they are trying to get over very, very quickly. there are extremist elements whose voices are heard here and there, but I don't think they have a sway at all in the council. And the council is going ahead with its main objective of liberating the rest of the country and of carrying on the mission it was supposed to accomplish.
Shashank Joshi, do you agree with that? Extremist elements hold no sway?
Well, they clearly hold enough sway to kill a senior member of the rebel leadership. Now, of course, they don't have any meaningful say on the TNC. They have no meaningful say at the very highest levels of leadership, nor are their extremist views in any way representative of what the bulk of the Libyan opposition believes. But they only take a little bit of sway, a little bit of influence, to really destabilise an entire movement. And the TNC's grip over this entire movement is a matter of some concern, not just in the East, but also in the West, where we have seen, despite the TNC's best efforts, despite their commitments, we have seen incidences of retribution, anti-tribal grievances being felt, and of course looting as well. And I haven't heard a coherent response to that from the TNC, recognising, of course, that they do not condone any of this.
I mean, you just brought up the issue there, Shashank, of the tribal issue. And there's another thing that Mohammed Younes's, Abdel Fattah Younes's nephew said. I wish for the NTC to be honest and to bring justice, because if this does not happen, then the Ubaidat tribe, that's Younes's tribe, will have to take things into their own hands. And that in itself just demonstrates how difficult it is to maintain a cohesion within the movement.
Well, I think the problem for the TNC is not how do they keep these tribes in check now. They are unified under an anti-Gaddafi banner. I think they probably will stay that way. And certainly, Younes's tribe has committed itself to the overall fight. The problem is, in the West, where the TNC has less influence, less of a presence. We have seen tribal grievances make themselves felt there, absolutely, and they are consistently, I think, underplayed by the TNC. And the second concern is, what happens when they win? What happens when this anti-Gaddafi animus, this anti-Gaddafi motivation is removed? Will we then see these lines of tribal identity make themselves felt once again? The opposition consistently denies there are any divisions. I think that's really an overly simplistic take, even if we also recognise there are some people who are exaggerating tribal divisions for their own ends.
OK, well, Anas Al-Gamati, do you think the NTC can hope to represent all the myriad tribes within Libya? Do you think it can actually do that?
Well, I have to comment on the tribal discourse that they're doing is that I do agree to a certain extent that it's played influence in Gaddafi's Libya and those that hold sway in the political and military world of Gaddafi. But I think it's played a very, very little influence, and especially it probably plays a bigger part to understand Omar Mukhtar's Libya in the 1920s and 30s than it does to 2011 in Libya. So I think as a categorization, it's something that people can understand and can be used to understand, large lines within the sands of Libya. But I don't really think it's going to play a very, very strong part, especially in the urbanized cities of Tripoli, Misrata, and to some extent Benghazi, where you find 2/3 of the population of Libya will live. So I think in a post-conflict reality, I don't think we're going to suffer as much. I think it's generally the case that in the Middle East, that if someone is killed for a reason that is beyond, the ideas of normal justice and things can't be taken into, especially if we take into the context that we're living in a military, we're in the moment of a military conflict. Then I'm sure that this is outside of the realm of normal day-to-day activities, and that's why the tribal influence now seems to be something that is a last resort. And if you analyse the nephew of Abdel Fattah Younes's his statement, then I'm sure that's the case that is presented. That this is the last alternative. It's not his first course of action, which is in fact his first course of action is to maintain unity and to seek understanding from the NTC first.
OK, Anna's going to jump in there because we need to push this on. It claims to be the only legitimate body representing the people of Libya. Let's take a quick look at the National Transitional Council. It is a political body formed to represent Libya, as I say, made up of anti-Gaddafi forces that gained momentum during the 2011 uprising that began back in February. It sees itself as the sole representative of Libya. It consists of 31 members representing various cities all over the country. Their aim is to steer Libya during the interim period that they say will come once Libya is liberated from Gaddafi's regime. 32 countries have accepted the National Transitional Council as the legitimate authority in the country. until an interim authority is in place. So let's put this to Ashur Shamis. Let's imagine a post-Gaddafi scenario. We're a long way from that, I know, but does the NTC have the unity, the wherewithal to take the helm, to steer Libya into a new era? What do you say?
Well, what I say is, first of all, we have to take into account that it is an interim council. It is not a permanent council, and therefore its remit is limited. There are a number of issues it should not concern itself with, like controlling the tribes and doing up a constitution and all. This is not his job. This is not the job of the council. That's one thing. And secondly, it is not concerned really with or those concerned with unifying Libya, but not concerned of eliminating all the differences that exist between the Libyans. There will be tribal hiccups here and there will be extremists all over Libya. But I'm telling you, the mainstream of the council and the mainstream of the movement that is now working to liberate Gaddafi, to liberate Libya from Gaddafi is completely united and completely coherent in its narrative and in its actions as well.
You say it's tribal hiccups. I mean, others say different, don't they? So others say it will be a catastrophically bad situation once, or if,
yes, I know.
If and when Gaddafi is gone, and if that's the case, it could be outright civil war.
I know. There are people who will pick up something and then exaggerate it and then build every conclusion on it. This is not true. There are extremist elements in Tunisia, in Egypt, in many countries that exist after the country settles down into running its own self, and after building its democracy and so on. There will be a lot of problems with building democracy in Libya, with including everybody and this sort of thing. So you will not eliminate that, but you can't take one thing and say because there are extremists then the country is doomed, or because there are tribes then tribes in Libya have proved all the time that they are not a dividing element, but in fact a uniting element.
Okay, let's bring in Shashank Joshi. What do you think about that? The tribes are a uniting element and will be.
Well, yes, of course, there are some people who have absurd views of tribes, who think North Africans can never have democracy, who think tribal divisions will always imperil any attempt to form a state. Those views are silly. Anyone can form a state, and the NTC, the mainstream of the NTC, has absolutely good intentions and is acting with reasonable foresight. However, let's imagine General Younes had been assassinated a week after the NTC took over in Tripoli. Can we then say the Obeidi tribe would have been as sanguine about submitting itself to central government? Can we say we wouldn't have seen armed elements, as we did in Benghazi for a short period after Younes's death, setting up checkpoints, arming themselves and demanding their own special inquiries? It is inevitable when you have groups that cleave along different identities. It will complicate any post-conflict situation. And let me also address the point that this is not normal behaviour, this is wartime behaviour. Yes, that's absolutely correct. But a post-conflict Libya, when Gaddafi has fallen, is going to be a very, very idiosyncratic, volatile situation in which many different groups will be seeking to entrench themselves in power. The NTC, with all of the good faith in the world, will not be the only actor seeking power in the middle at this point.
Ashur Shamis, what do you make of that?
It is not the only one. Yes, I agree with that because it's an interim council. There will be a new arrangements once Tripoli is liberated. There will be a new arrangements which include many elements in Tripoli and in other cities in the west and so on. So there will be a proper transitional period. That is the transitional period, and that's when the transitional period starts. So there will be different arrangements, and I can assure you that there are wise people in El Abedat, in Barasa, in many of the council, the tribes, and there are wise people in the council and in Tripoli, inside Tripoli now today, there are wise people who know exactly what to do when Gaddafi falls. And then there will be a play, a different play altogether. It's a different game altogether. The people will, I'm sure, come to a common consensus about the way to run Libya. But of course there will be problems, there will be arguments, there will be maybe even more killings, I don't know. But the thing is when is the country ready to sort itself out and sort those people out?
All right, we're just coming to the last phase of the programme. I just want to move it on to the military position. Opposition fighters say they've captured around 70% of the western city of Zawiya, but battles with Gaddafi forces still taking place. Zawiya has seen some of the fiercest fighting in the Libyan conflict, and its recapture would, of course, hold a great deal of significance to rebel forces. It is just 50 kilometres, which is about a half-hour's drive from the capital, Tripoli, and whoever controls it, it controls a vital supply route between the capital and the Tunisian border. There's also an oil field nearby, home to one of the two most important oil refineries in Libya. Rebels had captured the city back in March, but it was retaken by Gaddafi forces around 2 weeks later. Let's go to our man on the phone, Anas El-Gamati. He's in Libya. Anas, we've had overestimates of rebels' momentum before. Do you think we are right now in a significant new phase, or is this just a blip in the endless stalemate that we've been seeing?
No, in fact, I would actually, and I say this cautiously, go to your former, which is that I personally believe that it's not just the momentum that's carrying them on there. People have completely understood Gaddafi's capacity and have adapted their strategy as such. Everyone I've spoken to in the last 2 days, and having travelled around the majority of the east of Libya, word on the word in the east is that Khamis Gaddafi's death, or apparent death, and then subsequent non-death, was the reason that they've been able to take these three cities at 3 points in Libya, Berghanem, Hafa, Brega, and 70% of Zawiya. And people are firmly in the belief that if Khamis Gaddafi didn't die, then someone else has been taken down in the military, because this is something that has been a substantial gain.
Okay,
and,
let's put the same question to... Sorry to jump in there, we're just running out of time. Shashank Joshi, what do you think about the latest efforts from the opposition fighters as they attempt to tighten the noose around Tripoli?
Well, it blows apart the idea that there is anything like a stalemate in Western Libya. It completely shatters the idea this is a frozen conflict. And Zawiya is, I think, a very, very significant city. If it has been taken, and there are signs it may now have finally fallen, that would be extremely significant. It would be a double whammy, really. It would not only sever a key supply line into the capital city, but it would, of course, also starve the government of a key oil refinery, possibly the only functioning refinery it has. So if Zawiya has fallen, I think we're looking at a milestone in this conflict.
Ashur Shamis, what's your view?
More importantly, Gherian to the south of Tripoli is a garrison, really. The way it has fallen is a good example of how these forces come together. The Gaddafi forces falling apart, and the revolutionary forces ganging up and going in and taking it over. Now in Tripoli, it's imploding slowly and it's falling apart at the seams. This is what Gaddafi's forces are doing. They are losing soldiers, they are losing orders. They don't know where their orders come from. So I think the whole thing is collapsing, and its collapse encourages the people to come forward. And like the other speaker said, that if Zawiya has fallen, that is a very, very significant thing. But we will have to wait and see. It's not simple. There will always be pockets here and there, and it will take a little bit of time.
One final question, and I'd ask you to keep it brief if you would. I'll put it to Shashank Joshi. It's a big question, so it's hard to keep it brief. But how do you prepare a country for liberation? What do you do in the midst of war to prepare a country for its next phase, if that's indeed what is about to happen?
Well, I think you look with humility at past examples of cases where central governments have fallen. You look at Baghdad in 2003, you look at Kabul in 2001, and most importantly of all, you recognise that an inclusive provisional government, one that reaches out to those who have been defeated, is the one that is most likely to be stable and enduring.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. Shashank Joshi, we appreciate that. Ashur Shamis, and on the line from Libya, Anas El Gamati. Thanks very much indeed, gentlemen. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. It's always good, of course, to hear from you, so do drop us a line. Let us know what you think about what you've seen and what you'd like to see. Email insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark, bye for now.